When you think about this correlation, talk to me a little bit about there's decoupling, right? So like the correlation goes down. There's also this idea that like tech stocks could just explode. People go kind of risk on again. It sounds like you think the decoupling is more likely to be what happens than like there's a recovery in risk assets. Is that fair?
Yeah. So I think, for BTC to move up, just from first principles, you need either one of two things. And it boils down to either A, you need tech stocks to rebound, and that would drag BTC up if we have this sustained period of high correlation. The other way BTC could move up would be if that correlation broke down. And so with that in mind, I think for the latter, for the former, talking about tech stocks rebounding, I think Darius actually did a really good job. And I'm not going to get into that because I think he really nailed it on the head. He's more the expert in that realm of talking about like what it would take for tech stocks to rebound. One of the biggest things, obviously, just being like the Fed being extremely hawkish. But for the decoupling piece, I think that's where I could maybe provide listeners a bit more value with some kind of Bitcoin centric data points. And so like for this decoupling to theoretically occur, I think first just highlighting the fact that markets move in kind of these pendulum swings. And what I mean by that is like they go from extreme to extreme. And this happens not only with price action, but also like narratives and trends in the market. And the trend, obviously, we're talking about here is the correlation to the NASDAQ. So, when you go back and look at the chart, whenever the correlation gets extremely high, you could even see this at the beginning of this year. It went from getting to an all-time high and then came all the way back down to negative. And so you get this kind of pendulum swing that goes back and forth. And when everyone on Twitter is talking about, this correlation and it becomes consensus, that tends to be when that pendulum is beginning to start to swing the other direction. So I think that's one thing just to keep like preset in your mind, the fact that we've had this prolonged sustained regime of strong correlation to the NASDAQ. But for that decoupling to occur, you need either like two things, either in the short term, some type of idiosyncratic flow, meaning, some like large buyer stepping in, the Luna Foundation guard, Do Kwon stepping in and buying several $1 billion of BTC has been one example of that. Sailor was another example. So I think, if you had some large entity that stepped in, that could drive idiosyncratic flow in the short term and cause BTC to decouple in the short term. I think from a broader sense, and this I have a bit more high conviction on because it's hard to say is a large buyer going to step in or not. In a broader sense, I think what the data is showing you is that beneath the surface, you have a lot of these crypto native, high net worth individual, kind of forward looking institutions that are viewing BTC as a store of value. And, despite all of the uncertainty we've got geopolitically and just in markets in general, you're seeing several metrics, which we'll look at the charts in a moment, illustrating the fact that these holders are just holding, right? And so you kind of have this dichotomy of a lot of these traditional finance entities that are viewing BTC as, a high beta tech asset, and then these convicted crypto natives or just people that understand the value proposition of Bitcoin, and they're holding, during this time of uncertainty. This is the time that, Bitcoin was built for, right? We have inflation extremely high, geopolitical uncertainty. And so I think what's kind of going on beneath the surface is my buddy Suzu eloquently kind of phrased this to me as like a supply gentrification. And I think you kind of have this transfer of supply from that one basket of entities I talked about to the other. And so I think kind of this sideways range that we've been in is an illustration of equilibrium between the transfer of the two of those entities. And so I guess with that, we could dive into a few of the charts that I have to kind of back up that thesis.
So let's do this idea of how much supply hasn't moved in the last 12 months.
Okay.
And you're comparing the 7-day moving average off of the NASDAQ high. We were just talking about a bunch of stocks just getting absolutely decimated in the stock market. So what's this showing us?
Yeah. So in green, you're looking at the 7-day moving average of the NASDAQ, the percentage of the NASDAQ off its highs. And so, you can see right now we're about 18% roughly, or today it might be closer to 20%. Haven't looked at what the NASDAQ's doing in the last 45 minutes because I've been writing the newsletter. but I know it's down today, so it might be down closer to 20%. Point is though, NASDAQ down fairly substantially. At the same time, you have an all-time high in the amount of supply that hasn't moved in at least a year, and that's that orange line, or I should say orange kind of area or shaded area. And so this is honestly pretty remarkable when you think about it, right? You have an all-time high amount of supply that hasn't moved in at least a year, meaning people are sitting on their BTC convicted as ever, despite all the uncertainty we have that we just kind of described. Darius did a great job describing earlier today. And so to me, what this is showing is that there's this hodler base, right? This convicted hodler base that they view BTC as their store of value. I think, a lot of kind of, there's been several catalysts, even just this year, for example, Russia getting their FX reserve frozen. Maybe it's just inflation running high, or just over the last year as Bitcoin ran up, people taking interest in understanding the value prop of Bitcoin. The fact that you've got this growing hodler base. And I think this is honestly pretty remarkable. The fact that you have people holding with conviction to this extent, despite all the uncertainty. And this is exactly what, Bitcoin was built for.
Hey, you, did you like this video? Great. We make 5 of them a day and post them here on this channel. Make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and see you next time.